Hi, my name's Danny and these are my die-cast disasters. In this video I will be restoring / customizing these two Matchbox Superfast No1 mod rods. These were produced by Lesney, England from 1971 until 1975. Let's have a look at them. I acquired these cars amongst a bulk lot of very beat up old Matchbox cars from the 60s and 70s. The auction was titled Matchbox Graveyard. The kid who owned this car has had a go at painting it blue. Something has spilled on the bonnet and dissolved the paint, or perhaps something dropped on it while the blue paint job was still wet. They've painted the wheels brown, but a lot of this paint has just rubbed off. There is also brown paint on the windscreen, and blue and brown paint on the motor, as well as missing chrome. There's so much scruffy paint on the back, you can hardly even see the details. Our second car has been painted all black with a red stripe at the front. Perhaps they'd been watching Knight Rider. It's quite a thick coat of black paint. They've done some red highlights, the side mirrors, the headlights, the rear lamps, also the motor and exhaust. They've completely covered the windscreen in thick silver paint. They've also added a very wonky racing stripe. It is also very difficult to see any detail through the paint on this car as well. Quite a grubby base. The right rear wheel has a big gouge taken out of it. Also, the axle is quite bent. So I'll begin by putting the cars in my vise and drilling out the rivets. Be careful to only take off as much as you need and not to damage the base of the car. The recesses for these rear rivets were actually quite a tight fit for the drill. The base is popped out with a small screwdriver. Once I have the bases off, the windscreen just falls out. 2 tones of thick paint and quite a lot of chips and scratches. This windscreen has sure seen better days. The motor is held in with this little tab. They are made of kind of rubbery plastic. Well, it's a bit of a mess in there. He's lucky Kit can drive himself, because Michael's not going to be seeing much through this windscreen. Plastic on this motor was a little stiffer. The interior plastic is held onto the base with some small rivets. These are very carefully drilled out so as to not damage the plastic. A little coaxing it with a screwdriver and it pops right off. Now I will drill and tap the rivet post. This is a very short rivet post, so I've put some tape around my drill to let me know how deep I can go. I am using a 1.7mm drill bit. Here I am using a grinding stone on my rotary tool to modify a 256 tap. I will grind off most of the tapered end of the tap, otherwise it will just bottom out in the shallow hole before it even bites into the metal. Now I can carefully tap a thread into the hole. The screws I had were also much too long for the small rivet post. Here I am using my drill chuck to hold the screw while I grind it down with my rotary tool. A perfect fit. Now to do something about the paint on the windscreens and motors. I begin with a small jar of water. It is hot from the tap, but not too hot. I add a small amount of caustic soda. Be careful not to touch this mixture, as it will burn you. I drop the motors into my caustic water. After about 1 minute, I remove them. I give them a rinse in some plain cold water. Nice one. Most of the paint and chrome has come off, only a few stubborn bits left. I use a combination of a tiny screwdriver and the trusty old wife's toothbrush to remove this. This copper coloured paint was quite tough. I do the same to remove the rest of the paint on the other motor. I thought it was interesting how both of the motors were made of transparent plastic under the chrome. I use my chrome pen to re-chrome the motors. With their fresh coat of chrome, they are looking like new. The windscreens are given a dip in the caustic solution as well. A rinse and a rub with a cloth and most of the brown and blue paint has come straight off. There are a few patches of that stubborn copper paint. I use my small screwdriver to scrape off more of the weakened paint. I use light pressure so as to avoid scratching the plastic of the windscreen. Now some sandpaper. Most of the paint is gone now, but some stubborn areas require a little bit more scratching. That's looking okay now. The second window is also mostly free of paint now, and what paint is remaining is weakened, so I repeat the scratching and sanding process. I personally find this sort of thing very cathartic. looking good. Here are the sanded windscreens ready for a polish. I apply some polishing compound and use the pad on my rotary tool to polish the windscreens. Well, that's looking a far cry from when we started. I dip the windscreens in self-shining floor polish and set aside to dry. The light brown paint has not adhered well to these wheels, so it is relatively easily removed with some gentle scratching. I am careful not to press too hard and scratch the plastic of the wheels. After a few minutes work, they are looking much better and are ready to be touched up with the chrome pen. Now to remove the paint from the bodies. I apply paint stripper with a small brush and the bodies are left to sit for a few minutes. Out with the toothbrush again to scrub off the dissolved paint in some water. This process was repeated twice, with particular attention being paid to the tough bronze paint on the rear of one of the cars. After stripping the paint, I use some steel wool to clean up the castings. Here they are, cleaned and ready for painting. At this point I notice a small dent in the top of one of the castings, so I decide to file it out. I work gently with the file so as to only remove the high spots. Well, it's not perfect, but it looks much better. If I continue to file much more, I would create an unsightly pit in the casting. The cleaned car bodies are now sprayed with Tamiya Fine White Surface Primer. In between coats of primer, I take some time to inspect the details of the castings. The mod rod is not the most intricate casting in the world, but it has some nice grills, some petrol caps, headlights, and the rear is quite finely detailed. This inspection shows up another unsightly casting flaw. Again, I start by working very gently with the file so as to only remove the raised area. I try not to file away the body line. With the lump filed away, I can now use some sandpaper to tidy up the area. Here are the cars after priming and ready for a coat of yellow paint. The restoration car is painted with 3 coats of Tamiya X8 yellow and 2 coats of Tamiya TS13 clear. The custom car was painted with 3 coats of Tamiya X8 yellow, a pinstripe added with Tamiya X4 blue, and finished with 3 coats of Tamiya TS65 pearl clear. With the paint curing, it is now time to clean up the bases. The castings are in great shape, but they have some grime and patches of paint on them. Here is more of that stubborn copper paint. The first step is paint stripper. Again, the paint stripper does not have much effect on the copper paint, so I scrape it off with my scalpel. I give them a quick wash with some abrasive cleaner. This one still had some stubborn gunk which I had to scrape off with my scalpel. Ooh, I don't want to know what that was. I now remove the oxidization with some steel wool. There's another quite obvious flaw on this base. Again, I work very lightly with the file. I use small circles so I'm not constantly coming from the same direction and causing any gouges. And I'm trying to only remove the high spots. After filing, I use some sandpaper and some more steel wool. That's looking good. I use some polishing compound and my rotary tool to give them a nice shine. better than new. This rear wheel is too gouged to really be repaired. I've attempted to file and sand damaged wheels back to an acceptable state, but they really just get worse and worse. I didn't have any wheels the same to replace them with, so I'm going to use these awesome looking real riders. Unfortunately, they didn't quite fit, so I'll have to remove these small orange wheel spacing tabs on the plastic part. I carefully cut these off with a scalpel. Now the custom wheels clip into place no problem. Check out those bad boys. Finally, we have all our pieces refurbished and ready for reassembly. The axles just snap back into the plastic interior section. I remove a yellow painted screw. I replace the motor by pushing the tab back down into place. I'm gentle and careful not to scratch the paint job. The windscreen just drops in. I use a couple of tiny drops of super glue to hold the interior plastic onto the cast base. Finally, I put the base and body sections together. The screw is then replaced. As it is such a great tight fit, I have not had to add any adhesive to the undrilled rivet posts at the rear of the car. The base holds on just fine with the one screw. With our cars back together, it is now time for the reveal. Here's a reminder of what we started with. A real die-cast disaster in anyone's book. And here it is restored. With a smooth new yellow paint job and freshly chromed engine and wheels, it's looking almost as good as new.
taking a look back at the other car, we are reminded of its terrible Knight Rider-esque paint job. And here is our finished car, with custom wheels and paint job. As a homage to the 2 previous customization attempts, I have given the car a racing stripe, and I've made it blue. You can see the pearl finish sparkle as the light hits the car from different angles. Considering the shape of the cars when I started, I'm very pleased with how they have turned out. They looked ready to go in the bin, but are now something I'll be proud to put on my display shelf. I would like to take a moment to say welcome to all of the new subscribers to the channel, and to say a special thanks for all of the great comments on the last video. Thanks everyone. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.